There we are. All right. I'm going to go see over here as people show up and welcome Megan aboard.
Hi, David.
Look at us. Hello.
How are you?
It's so nice. It's so nice to be here, and I'm just so grateful that we get to collaborate in this way.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
feeling the already.
me too.
Now, as people arrive and as comments come on, and actually, you are welcome right now. Anyone that is coming to this via Facebook or YouTube, you can tell us where you are in the world. We would love to know. And unfortunately, Megan, you won't see, but I'll let you know.
That would
So,
be great.
oh, well, look at that. I have an Austinite here with us
Yay!
already. It's nice.
That's great.
And I think what we can do is enjoy as people arrive, and then and give it a moment or two, and then we can talk a little bit about Lantern. Okay, we have Massachusetts, we have Vermont,
There we go.
we have Michigan, we have Athens, Georgia, Seattle, Virginia, Bridgewater, New Jersey, Richmond, Chicago, the suburbs. And oh, I see that's Richmond coming back in. Amherst is here.
Yay! Amherst is here.
Yeah, right.
Great.
Oh, well, actually, he has the same last name as you. So.
Oh, that's my friend. That's my friend.
Orlando, Nashua, Lawrence, Kansas is here. Long Island, New York.
Hi,
And
everybody.
another Massachusetts, Los Angeles, Colorado, Canada, Lancaster, Memphis, West Suffield, Connecticut, Farmers Branch, Texas, and Winchester, Virginia. I was just near Winchester, Massachusetts a little bit ago.
That's not far from us.
No, and you're from Amherst?
We live in Amherst. Yeah, I'm originally both Brian and I are from the Boston area. Though Brian's from Stoneham, which is right next to Winchester. So.
Oh my word! I was just there in Concord.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, I didn't walk it this time, but I did last time.
Okay.
So we have Alaska and Montana, and some more Massachusetts, some Missouri, Fair Oaks, California. I love this part. So I know that at some point we need to stop and tell the story. It is maybe just another moment, and then we can talk about Lantern Walk. I love Lantern Walk so much. Durham, another Austin. Have my glasses on. Nice. Oh, good. It seems that we have a solid group in attendance. Pittsburgh and Arlington. Well, I'll talk about the story in a moment, but the story was written for Lantern Walk. It was when I was teaching in northern Vermont. It was written specifically for that. And there's two versions. One version is longer, but this is the shorter one that was intended for doing right before Lantern Walk. And I wonder if people are going to listen to this and then do their walk, or if everyone is doing it on the first.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have made a tradition at Tinkergarten. Some of my Tinkergarten friends may be doing it on the first. And my husband and partner in crime and the other Amherst that's on here, or maybe one of the other Amherst. And I started this tradition when our oldest was 2 and was starting to become more aware of the world. And we recognized our own melancholy or frustration that would surface when we turned the clocks back in the fall, because we would mourn the loss of our running time or the daylight, and we talked about the fact that maybe this wasn't the best of ideas, but also she found it really exciting that things were changing. And we thought, well, we should lean into this. And we were aware of the traditions of Lantern Walk that have been, and lights and bonfires around the world that happen this time of year. This very common celebration of hearth and light and hope. And
Mhm.
so we thought, well, we should really do something about this and put it out to our community then in Brooklyn before we came to Amherst, Brooklyn, New York. And hundreds of people made lanterns and came out on an evening, this very evening. So we traditionally do it at Tinkergarten on the day after we turn the clocks back, that day where you feel the difference.
Nice.
You kind of feel the change. So it's so palpable because there's we almost force that switch for ourselves.
Mhm.
So this year, though, we don't have our in-person big walks organized by Tinkergarten because we want to be really thoughtful and careful, but we've put together a toolkit so people can make a lantern walk that works for them. So it works for
Mhm.
their family or their neighborhood or their whole community if they feel like that makes sense. We have people who are putting lanterns in windows and doing hunts and walks. We have groups getting together carefully, and we have families, thousands of families who've signed up to say they're going to walk and get a toolkit of ways to make lanterns and things
Mm.
and saying, but this story is a very special story. And I just want to, before we begin, say that I want to put my mom hat on and thank you so much
Mm.
because we've grown up with Martin and Sylvia and all of the stories. And Sparkle Stories holds a most special place in my heart. And I know many of my teammates and my friends, and from car rides to cozy couch time,
Mm.
you really sparked our imagination and kind of captured the wonder of childhood. So feel a very strong kinship to Sparkle Stories and just feel extra honored that
Mhm.
our communities can enjoy this story together tonight. So thank you for doing that.
Yes, thank you for saying. That's
Yeah.
really kind of you. It, I feel like our two initiatives have grown, alongside each other,
Yeah.
and so I've always felt very tenderly around about Tinkergarten, and just um, especially right now,
Yeah.
any opportunity to get outside, any opportunity to just really connect and commune with nature. And in my experience, which is what brought me to storytelling, I am really connected in and with the natural world. When I'm really present, stories come up.
Mhm.
It, they're really related. They're really
Mhm.
connected that way. And the festival life is really about that, isn't it? It's about nature and it's about story and bringing those together and sharing them in community, which is what you're bringing everyone. Now, I know that there are a number of people who will be listening to tonight's story that may not be familiar with Tinkergarten. I know that there are a number that are here from Tinkergarten. May I ask you just a little bit more about what it is?
Absolutely. And Tinkergarten is an organization that helps bring purposeful outdoor play to families. So we focus on helping parents make the most of early years, which we define as sort of 6 months to 8 years old, and help to offer a type of playful learning that can come through to parents through classes. And for years, we've had classes that convene together in local parks and in small groups led by our amazing leaders, who is what we call our teachers. And then in recent months, we've also added on an online class that really makes it possible for us to reach everybody during this most unusual time. And that's what we call Circle Time. And it's an online class that inspires kids to play throughout the week outdoors. So we are all about getting outdoors, connecting with nature, and developing all kinds of skills and sense of self through outdoor play.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Wonderful. Well, I hope we can collaborate again. And so I'm going to tell a little story. And
Wonderful.
then can I bring you back forward, Megan,
That
and
would be
we
great.
can
I
hear a
would love
little bit more about what's going on for
That'd
this
be
week,
great. That'd be
special
great.
week? Okay. Then I'm
Thanks.
going to gently put you back in that cozy place that you were before, and
Wonderful.
see you in a little bit.
Thanks, David. Susan.
All right. So I was a teacher before telling stories. And I got to be a part of a school that had a yearly lantern walk, and so I would take my class on these walks, and sometimes I would tell a story, sometimes someone else would tell a story. But it was on a particular day, which is a little bit later in the year, well, not that much later, but in November, early November. And the lantern walks that I participated in were connected to a particular individual that represented service. So the story, and what I mean by service, is someone that really dedicated themselves to helping people. especially those that were in need. And it was a story about someone who was, highborn, someone who was in a position of power and decided to use that power and use that privilege to help someone that didn't have any power and didn't have any privilege. And so lantern walks in this school were connected to that individual. And so you'll hear a little bit of that in tonight's story. But really, and I should say, this story, and I really think lantern walks in general, this connection they have to light is very personal, and it's also connective, meaning that we all have light in us and we all need the light in order to thrive, in order to live, and not just the sunlight, but the light from our family and the light from our friends and the light from our schoolmates, and everyone carries that, and we get to celebrate that, especially when the sunlight becomes a little more dim, when there's less of it at this time of the year, and every night it gets a little bit longer, a little bit longer, and a little bit longer. And corresponding with that, you will find that the light inside of you during this time of the year actually gets brighter, and you can see it in people, especially at night when you're walking in the dark, and each of you has a lantern that's bringing that light as a gift to the group. So I hope you all have just a magical lantern walk. And if this story can help inspire you, if you've never done one before, then I hope it does. And then Megan will tell you a little bit more about how you can have your first or second or third or fourth lantern walk. So it's called The Lantern Prince. So once upon a time, there was a grand kingdom that had a huge castle that was built into the side of a mountain. It overlooked a beautiful, pristine lake. And inside this castle was a king and queen. They were also equally grand. They were upright. They were strong individuals, handsome people. And the people of that land followed them. Wherever they said, whatever they said to do, they did it because they had deep respect for the king and queen. And they also had some fear because the king and queen ruled like many kings and queens did in those days, with a heavy hand if need be. But hopefully they didn't need that. Now, this very grand castle and very grand king and queen, amongst all of this beauty and grandeur and pomp and riches, was a child. This was the child of the king and queen. It was a boy. He was the prince. And the prince was very different than the king and queen. As he grew up, as he became a young boy and then an older boy, he did all the things that princes were to do. He was a studious child. He did his training. He learned all that he needed to learn. He learned different languages. He knew how to be polite, how to be courteous. He knew all the chivalry, all that stuff. He was very good at all of that. But he was also very kind. And he was kind to everyone. Now, that may seem strange that isn't something that would be common, but it actually wasn't, especially for royals. Now, royals may be polite, may be courteous, may be strong, may be scholarly, but in those days were seldom kind. That was not a valued trait, but this boy definitely was. And at first, when the child was young, mother and father, the king and queen, they thought it was the folly of a child. They thought it was cute. They didn't make much of it. But as he got older, and his kindness only seemed to grow, well, then they got a little concerned. They didn't see that as an appropriate trait for royal. And then that really came to head with an experience when the child was 12 years old. And the prince went with his mother, the queen, on a trip. And they took a carriage ride through the countryside out to a manor, their manor, that was on the sea, on the ocean. It was a long ride there, but it was a very beautiful ride so far as the royals were concerned. They went past the mountains and they went into beautiful open fields, tall grass, grazing cows and sheep, and a beautiful bucolic scene that they would pass on their way to the manor. Now, the reason why it looked like that was because normally in those fields were a series of huts, rudely built pieces of wood and things that were dragged out from the forest that made these tiny huts, and the huts were for the farm workers. And the huts barely kept them warm, kept them dry, barely. And they didn't look very nice. And many of the farm workers were underfed and were sickly, and they were tired, and some of them were injured. And so before the carriage got there, it was custom for members of the guard to go through and clear out all the huts, clear out all the servants that looked sickly or weak or injured or not nicely dressed. And so the only servants that could remain behind were those that looked nice and looked strong and were doing their chores, and they seemed happy, because that was what the royals wanted to see. That was custom. So the guard went through and cleared everything out, and as the coach was approaching, something unexpected happened. Because you see, one of those workers was not cleared out. She was an older woman. She was not feeling well. She lay down by a big rock, and the rock was warm, so the rock kept her warm, and she took some pine boughs and covered herself with those pine boughs so that she could be warm, and she fell asleep. And so while she was asleep is when everyone else was cleared out. And so when the guards were gone, she came out from under the boughs and started to crawl towards the road. And as the carriage passed by, the prince saw the old woman. Immediately wanted to help her. Of course he did. He could see she was hungry. She needed food. She probably needed something to keep her warm. She needed so much. But the queen covered the prince's eyes, covered his ears until they were past. And when she uncovered, he asked her, "Let's go back. Let's help her. She needs help. We need to go." And she looked him in the eyes. And she said, "You will one day be king. And it's time that you begin to act that way. Everyone has their place. And yours, son, is not with the likes of her." The prince was an obedient child. He did not speak back to his mother, but he did not agree with her. So he was quiet for the rest of the ride out to the manor, and they were there for a few days. And then when it was time to finally go back to the castle and they went down that road, the prince looked in all directions for the woman or anyone. He didn't see her. So he was troubled when he got back to the castle. It was late. It was time for him to go to bed, but he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about her. He kept imagining her face. He could see she was not well. She needed help. What to do? It got to be very late, and he could not go to sleep. And then he had an idea. He could help her. He could help her. And so he listened to make sure that everyone was asleep. The cat was quiet. He went down into the kitchen. He got a lantern. He lit the lantern. He got some bread. He got a vial of water. He got his cloak because it was a cold night, and he went to the stables to get a horse. Quietly, he led the horse out of the stables and into the countryside. It took some time to find the road, but he found it. And as he was going, middle of the night, it was dark, just the slightest starlight was leading his way. He could see the rock that he saw the woman by. So he got off the horse, he took the lantern and used it in order to see where he was going until he got to the rock, and he heard some shuffling. He knelt down with his lantern, and he could see her face. And she looked at him and said, "Leave me be, I've done nothing." And he said, "No, no, I have this for you." And he gave her the bread and he gave her the water, and she began to eat it. And he said, "Are you all right? What else do you need? Can I bring you anything else?" And then he got the sense that there were others. And he looked into the darkness, and though he couldn't see anything, he could feel them. There were many such servants in that field. And he said, "What can I do for you? What can I bring you? I will." He didn't know what to say. She needed so much. What could he do? So he left her with the bread and the water, and he promised he would come back. He left the lantern with her and told her, "Light the lantern. Tomorrow night, light it, and I will find you and I will bring you more." So in the darkness, he went back to the castle. He put the horse away and he snuck back up to his room. He got an hour of sleep. And in the morning, he resumed his princely duties. He did what was expected of him. He did his lessons. He did his training. He made no indication that anything unusual had happened that night. And the next night, he did the same thing. He waited until everyone was asleep. He brought another lantern. This time, he brought clothes to give them. And he brought a new cloak because he had left his cloak with the woman by the rocks so she could be warm. And he brought firewood. He brought everything that he could think of. And he went there that night. And he gave those things to not only the old woman, but another servant that needed food and needed warmth. And the prince did this every night. Every night he couldn't wait until everyone was asleep so that he could go into the countryside, bring another lantern, bring some more food, bring another cloak. And this happened night after night, week after week. And no one in the royal family suspected, except his mother. The queen caught some clues. She saw that hidden in his room were a series of these rudely made rag dolls made out of scraps of cloth. And then she found some bracelets and necklaces made out of stones. And what she didn't realize is that those were gifts that the servants gave to the prince to say thank you. And then she overheard some of the servants. They were talking, and they spoke of the lantern prince that would go into the country and give them food and give them warmth. And she wondered, could it be my son? Well, years passed, and he continued to do that every night. And in time, the king, his father, died. And so it was time for him, the prince, to become king. And at his coronation, which is the big event where he is getting his crown and he becomes officially king, so many people came. From miles away they came because they loved him. And they arrived. And the moment that the crown was placed on his head, everyone called out, "All hail the Lantern King." And the queen looked at the crowd and saw the look of love in their eyes. She looked at her son with the love in her heart, and she was changed. She knew now that ruling with might is nowhere near as strong as ruling with love. And so the entire kingdom changed. It was now a kingdom of service rather than might. And the king one night, it was a dark night, was lying in his bed, just thinking, marveling over what had occurred. Stirred and got out of bed and walked over to his window just to look out at the night sky. And what he saw was incredible. He saw lights peppering the landscape, little lights everywhere. And they were the lights from the lanterns of the people that he had helped, who no longer needed help, but were ready to give service to others. And so he looked out and smiled, looking at each of the lights, each flickering in their own unique way, but all part of what seemed to be the same sky. Thank you for listening to that story. And before I bring Megan back over so that we can really get excited about doing our lantern walk, I want to tell you that I'm going to be telling a lot of stories this season. And it will be here, it will be on Facebook, it will be on YouTube, and sometimes we'll do it in other places as well. But if you wanted to come to those stories, the live stories, you can be a part of our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. The next story that I'm going to be telling, I'm actually going to be telling with 9 other storytellers, all here in Austin, the best actors and storytellers here in Austin. We're all coming together to tell a sparkle story called The Fool's Tale. And that's going to be Halloween night at 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. So depending on where you are, you can ask an adult what time that is where you live. And it's really fun and really funny. So I hope you can come Halloween night, October 31st, and listen to that story and come and listen to more of them. And if you want to come to that, there's a little below this on the Facebook page, there's a little thing that talks about the Halloween story and a place where you can register or you can just know about it. Okay, so enough about Sparkle Stories. Let's bring Megan back and hear more about Lantern Walk. Hi.
Hi, David. Thank you for that story. I had joined my friends in the other part of the house to listen, and they loved it.
Oh, nice.
It's a beautiful story, and I will carry that kind of message of service and community and kindness into this Lantern Walk this year. That is it's really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we're very excited for anyone who's watching live or who watches after, that November 1st is the day that Tinkergarten Community walks, and we have lots of different ways to make lanterns. This is one that a friend from the neighborhood made, if you can see it. And very kid-centric, but we have if you go to tinkergarten.com/lantern-walk, you can sign up for a toolkit that's free, and you can download that toolkit for if you want to walk as a family, if you want to walk as a neighborhood, or if you want to walk as a whole community. And there are tips for how to make different types of lanterns with the things you have on hand, especially in ways that are great for kids, and other songs, and we'll include this story in that toolkit as soon as it's finished so we can link to it. So if people want to see the story again and ground themselves in such a wonderful message of hope and kindness before they walk or after, and directions on how to do that. And we'll be sharing out photographs from around the country as people share them on Instagram for Tinkergarten, and on our and on both Facebook and Instagram all day on the 1st. We'll have some prizes for lanterns that people share, and just sharing the joy and the light and these amazing photographs of people doing this all over the world in this moment. So we're really excited about that.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I want to do it too. So I
Excellent.
may be doing it in downtown Austin. We'll see.
Perfect.
All right.
We have a lot of friends in Austin for Tinkergarten too, so that would be great.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
It would be excellent for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I hope we can do this again and have a wonderful, magical Halloween and Lantern Walk week.
Absolutely. And we'll look forward to the story on Halloween too. So we'll tune in for that.
Okay.
Thank you, David. Thanks to the whole Sparkle Stories team.
Thank you to you. And bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Time.